So look at Anthony Ryder from South Lyon, Michigan, recently selected as the Lions 2020 Fan of the Year. He has a passion about sports broadcasting.
With the 112th selection in the 2021 NFL Draft, the Detroit Lions select Amon-Ra St. Brown, wide receiver, USC. One pride, baby! Yeah!
What is going on, everybody? Welcome back to another Detroit Lions video. Now, the Detroit Lions had a pretty solid season, right? They finished 9-8 with a winning record for the first time since 2017, and they, as an offense, scored the second most points in franchise history. But where is all this success coming from, right? Obviously, with a team that had ups and downs, there are going to be standout players that stand above the rest, and players that you look at and say, those guys are the reasons we won. Those guys are the reason that we had all of this success last season, and those guys really need to be considered and talked about and looked at as potentially the future of this franchise. So today, we're going to look at this season and we're going to look at different awards, right? At the end of the season, the NFL always gives out offensive and defensive player of the year, rookies of the year, coaches of the year, MVPs, things like that. And at the end of the day, the Lions have a lot of those players. Now, they're not going to win league MVP. They're not going to win necessarily league offensive rookie of the year, defensive rookie of the year. But for the team in general and for the team within themselves, they've had a lot of standout players, and they're going to have team awards as to who contributed the most. And that's what we're going to talk about today. So with that being said, starting off with team MVP, it's Jared Goff. Jared Goff was phenomenal this season. He threw for over 4,400 yards, nearly 30 touchdowns to 7 interceptions in what is arguably his most efficient, if not his outright best season in the NFL as a full-time starter. Jared Goff was phenomenal. Now, he started the season a little rough, a little shaky, right? He was very much a part of that 1-6 start and very much a reason the Lions were 1-6. But he's also the reason the Lions finished 9-8. He's also the reason the Lions finished their season on an 8-2 run and ended up having a scoring offense that rivaled any other team in franchise history. Jared Goff, down the stretch through the last 8 or 9 games, finished the season with 17 touchdowns to 1 interception. He was easily a top 10 quarterback down the stretch for the Detroit Lions, and in the month of December was arguably the best quarterback in the NFL statistically. He was leading almost every major statistical passing category over guys like Mahomes and Allen and Burrow and Herbert. All of those big name quarterbacks that are now in the NFL playoff were outproduced by Jared Goff in December and for a large portion of November and January as well. Jared Goff through the last 8 to 9 games of the season was easily, undebatably, a top 10 quarterback in the NFL, and you could argue through the month of December and January was the best quarterback in the NFL, at least from a statistical standpoint. This man was the reason the Lions won 9 games, and I don't think without him, the Lions win more than 6, if we're being entirely honest. Now, looking at Offensive Player of the Year, I think this is kind of a split, kind of a tie. You could give it to Jamaal Williams. I think Jamaal Williams has earned it a little bit more, right? Obviously, his first 1,000-yard season, the Lions' first 1,000-yard rusher in over a decade, broke the rushing touchdown record that Barry Sanders held for a very long time with 17 on the season, including 2 to cap off the year to beat and slam the door on the Green Bay Packers playoff hopes. Jamaal Williams was a phenomenal player. Jamaal Williams was a touchdown machine. He was a goal scorer. He was a scorer. He got a lot of points on the board, but I wouldn't say his impact in between the 20s was really as felt most of the time, right? I'd say against Seattle, he had a big game. Against Chicago, both times he had a pretty big game. But there were games where he also disappeared. There were games where he kind of benefited from Amon-Ra St. Brown maybe getting tackled at the 2-yard line, and he was able to punch it in. So I think as much as we can point and say Jamaal Williams is easily that guy because he scored so many touchdowns and because he, had so many points on the board, I think Also, some credit has to go to Amon-Ra St. Brown, who got the Lions there. The Lions' first 1,000-yard receiver since Kenny Galladay in 2018. The Lions' second-year wide receiver had 106 catches, over 1,100 yards, and 6 touchdowns. And as I said, was tackled short of the goal line probably 4 to 5 times, where Jamal Williams benefited. So if we're really looking at it, he could have easily had 1,000 yards and 10 touchdowns on the season if he was able to just get 1 or 2 more yards on the play. But at the end of the day, of course, they're not selfish players. They give touchdowns to their teammates and they're excited to win. But I think Amon-Ra St. Brown being Offensive Player of the Year is the best option. Amon-Ra St. Brown was easily the most efficient weapon, easily the best weapon on the team. And when he missed games, right, when he was out versus New England, when he was out versus Minnesota, you really saw the offense change, right? Even when he got kicked out versus Dallas because of his concussion protocol, you saw the offense go from, oh, we're moving the ball, to, oh, we can't move the ball anymore because 14's not on the field, right? His impact, I think, is bigger than necessarily his numbers would indicate. And even though based on yardage and touchdowns, you might give it to Jamal Williams, I think impact-wise, Amon-Ra St. Brown was phenomenal. So I couldn't decide. I love both of them. So they're going to share the Offensive Player of the Year award as of right now. Let me know in the comments, what player do you think deserved it more? Jamal Williams or, of course, Amon-Ra St. Brown? Now, looking at Defensive Player of the Year, Aiden Hutchinson was the Defensive Player of the Year. This guy was phenomenal. Led the team in sacks. I believe was tied for takeaways, if not one takeaway behind Kirby Joseph, with 3 interceptions, 2 fumble recoveries, and 9.5 sacks, despite being one of the highest double-team players in the NFL, only behind Myles Garrett. He was double-teamed more than Micah Parsons, was double-teamed more than TJ Watt, at least at a percentage rate, was double-teamed more than the Bosa's. Anybody you look at throughout the NFL, he was double-teamed more than anybody, with the exception of Myles Garrett. And he still walked away with 9.5 sacks, 9 more tackles for loss on top of that, 15 quarterback hits, and 5 turnovers by himself. He was phenomenal this season. He was easily the Lions' best defensive player this year. He is and very well should be up for Defensive Rookie of the Year in the league. I don't know if he'll get it because the NFL loves them some Sauce Gardner and loves them some narrative, but Aiden Hutchinson at the very least should be top 3 in voting at NFL Defensive Rookie of the Year. And for the number 2 overall pick, whose impact was not always felt on the stat sheet, wasn't always felt through sacks and production, Aiden Hutchinson was the best, and I'd say one of the more impactful players on the defense this year as a whole. But looking at Defensive Rookie of the Year, just for the sake of parity, I'm going to give it to James Houston. James Houston came on the scene incredibly late, only making his NFL debut on Thanksgiving as a special teams / really obvious passing down player. And then in the next 7 games, he proceeded to get 8 sacks, finished second in the rookie class for sacks gotten by a defensive player, or by a defensive rookie. And he and Aiden Hutchinson down the last 2-3 games of the season were neck and neck for sack title among rookies. Now, Aiden Hutchinson ended up getting it with 9.5 after having 2 on Sunday night, but James Houston was phenomenal. 8 sacks in 7 games, 1 forced fumble, 1 fumble recovery, the highest pass rush win rate in the league, not just among rookies, in the league as a player. James Houston had the highest pass rush win rate percentage, as well as I think his impact just being more than Aiden Hutchinson, right? I would say Aiden Hutchinson's Defensive Player of the Year because that impact was there all season. But if we're talking the last 7 games, James Houston was the most impactful player on the Lions team. He was pressuring quarterbacks. He was forcing the pocket to collapse. He was, just beating offensive tackles over and over and over again with arguably the same move. It's just so unstoppable that they couldn't do anything to slow down James Houston and his sack production, where he walked away with 2 sacks against Josh Allen, walked away with a sack against Trevor Lawrence, and, I believe 3 sacks against Justin Fields. And he didn't get home versus Aaron Rodgers necessarily, but he very much impacted that game over and over and over. And if you look at both of Aiden Hutchinson's sacks, James Houston was right there with them, impacting Aaron. And if James Houston was not there, I don't think Aiden Hutchinson gets either sack necessarily on Sunday night. So both of them are kind of benefiting from each other. And once James Houston arrived on the scene, both players got better. The pass rush and defense as a whole got significantly better. And those two as a duo are just fun to watch. So James Houston gets Rookie of the Year, while Aiden Hutchinson gets Defensive Player of the Year. Talking about Breakout Player of the Year, a player that we weren't really expecting to have a huge impact, but very much did, was John Kaminsky. John Kaminsky is somebody that came in, was not really known, was used a really high waiver wire pickup on, and came in and did his job. I mean, he had 4 sacks, which was 3rd on the team behind the 2 rookies. He is a great run stopper, got his hands up and got, I believe, 3 or 4 passes defended on the season. I mean, he was so vastly underrated as a defensive player. He played on the edge, he played on the interior. He was kind of a Swiss Army knife that could do everything and was really good at almost everything he did. John Kaminsky, I made a video about this a while ago, was the underrated player of this defense, because when he got hurt, the defense was atrocious. In the 4 to 5 games that he missed, the Lions got 0 team sacks from their defensive line and got 1 sack as a football team, which was a free blitz from Alex Anzalone. John Kaminsky maybe doesn't make this defense anymore, because I think they have some good players. Aleem came along and James Houston came along and Hutchinson came along, but without John Kaminsky, this team and this defense do not turn around the way that they did. They don't look nearly as good as they did this season. So just as a little shout out, just as a little bit of a, gratitude to John Kaminsky, he is the breakout player, the unexpected player of the year that nobody saw coming. Offensive Rookie of the Year is really hard because they didn't have a whole lot of offensive rookies in the draft. They took just Jameson Williams and James Mitchell, neither of whom were really that big of an impact, right? James Mitchell actually, funnily enough, every time he was targeted, made a reception. I believe had just over 150 yards and a touchdown on the year on 12 receptions. Well, Jameson Williams was kind of the opposite. He caught just 1 ball from 10 targets. That football did go in the end zone for a touchdown, and on Sunday night, he did have another big reception for a touchdown that was called back due to holding, and we saw the explosiveness. We saw the ceiling of a guy like J-Mo, but the consistency wasn't really there. So you could really give it to either. Neither player really did a whole lot to deserve an award, but since they are the only 2 that fit the criteria, I think that they kind of both share it as kind of a, participation trophy a little bit. I think both of them can turn into very good players. I think James Mitchell next year could turn into somebody that has a bigger role on the offense. Same thing with Jameson Williams, of course. I think both could be really good receiving threats next year as they get more chemistry with Jared Goff and as they kind of get more time to acclimate to NFL defenses and NFL play. But as of right now, neither one really showed out a ton in their rookie year, but I do think both could still develop and become very, very good players for the Lions. And then we get to Coach of the Year. Now, there's a lot of candidates for this. Right, you have Dan Campbell, who improved so much. You have Aaron Glenn, who did such a good job. You have guys, maybe even a positional coach like Kelvin Shepard or Hank Fairley or, XYZ coach. But the obvious and the best choice here is Ben Johnson. Ben Johnson was phenomenal this season. He held the Detroit Lions and took them right to a top 5 scoring offense where they were very, very poor a season ago. He was innovative. He put Jared Goff in situations to succeed. And even when players started to get injured, even when Chark and Reynolds and St. Brown and Swift were all out of the game and the Lions had just traded TJ Hawkinson, Ben Johnson went into a football game against the Chicago Bears, who have some talent on defense, right, and have a defensive-minded head coach, with Jared Goff, Khalif Raymond, Tom Kennedy, and Brock Wright, and put up 31 points. Now, yes, the pick 6 and, all of that, but put up 31 points with Tom Kennedy, Khalif Raymond, Brock Wright, and I believe, Jamal Williams was the running back, but still, those are backups. Those are 3rd string. Those are practice squad players in the case of Tom Kennedy. And Ben Johnson and Jared Goff still put up 31 to win the football game. I have no doubt that Ben Johnson will be a head coach at some point. Maybe this year, if not this year, absolutely next year. Ben Johnson's a phenomenal coach. I wish the Lions could keep him long term. I wish that he could stay for 4 or 5 years and really help develop this team, really help get this team to a Super Bowl, because I think if Ben Johnson stays in Detroit, I think the offense continues to stay top 5. And I think the Lions are going to be Super Bowl contenders if Ben Johnson stays. If Ben Johnson returns for a second year at offensive coordinator for the Detroit Lions with Aaron Glenn staying, this team can make a serious run at the North, the playoffs, and potentially the Super Bowl. So Ben Johnson, for his first time being offensive coordinator, for his contributions to the Detroit Lions and helping them become a top 5 scoring offense in the league and one of the top scoring offenses in franchise history, I think deserves credit for Coach of the year. So with all that being said, that's all I got for you guys today. Let me know down in the comments below, what awards would you give to which player? What player do you think deserved MVP, offensive player, defensive player of the year, rookie of the year, coach of the year? I'd be very curious what you guys think. Do you guys agree with my list? Do you guys disagree with my list? I'd be very curious what you guys think and how you guys feel. But with all that being said, that's all I got for you guys today. Thank you all so very much for watching, and until next time, and as always, go Lions.